Welcome to the deep dive. We've got a really interesting topic to dig into today. We've been getting a lot of questions from listeners about HR certification.
Yeah, it's a hot topic for sure.
Does it actually matter? Like, does it really make a difference?
Well, that's what we're here to find out. We've got a whole stack of articles and research on this, so we're going to dive deep and see what the experts have to say.
What's really cool is that this debate is going on, within the HR world itself,
Yeah.
right? It's not just something people are talking about on the outside.
Yeah, you've got researchers, practitioners, even HR executives all weighing in on this.
So, at the heart of all this is this 2012 article by Leninic Hall and Aquinas. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Aquinas. Like the
Hey, Guinness, yeah.
a Guinness. Okay, so their work seems to have kicked off this whole wave of discussion on the value of certification.
Absolutely. And one of the things that Lennox Hall and Aquinas found really interesting was that despite all the different viewpoints, there was this common thread. Everyone was calling for more evidence-based research, like they wanted to see some actual data to back up all these omniums.
And that makes sense. So, let's get into some of those different perspectives then.
Mhm.
One that really stood out was Diane Cohen. She really dives into the relationship between SHRM, that's the Society for Human Resource Management, right?
Right.
And HRCI, the Human Resource Certification Institute.
Yeah, and Cohen brings up this really important point about the supposed firewall between those organizations.
Okay.
Because even though they claim to be separate, they have this history of collaboration and shared financial interests.
So it's kind of like, how objective can they really be about certification's value?
Exactly. And that's why Cohen's really pushing for more research. We need to get a clearer picture, one that's free from potential conflicts of interest.
That's fair. Then you have Anthony Denisi, who's coming at it from a totally different angle.
Yeah, Denise is really focused on the challenges of actually measuring the impact of certification.
How do you even know if it's making a difference?
Right, because he's not convinced that just knowing HR concepts automatically makes you better at your job.
I guess that makes sense.
And one of his concerns is that, performance reviews might not be super accurate when it comes to this.
Oh, interesting.
Because if a manager knows someone's certified, they might unconsciously rate them higher.
Even if their actual performance isn't any different.
Exactly.
So it's like bias creeping into the data.
Right, and that makes it even harder to isolate the true impact of certification.
For sure. So this kind of brings us to Gary Latham, whose work really builds on this idea. Both he and Genesi really stress the need for, more objective measures.
Absolutely. They're arguing that we need to figure out what actually makes someone successful in an HR role and then design studies that can accurately measure those things.
So, how do we measure what actually matters?
Right.
Now, there's Garza and Morganson, who are looking at things from, an organizational perspective.
Yeah, they bring a whole new angle to the debate.
Okay, what's that?
Well, they're arguing that a company's values could actually influence how much weight they give to certifications when they're making hiring or promotion decisions.
That's really interesting.
Right. Like companies that prioritize things like innovation or being people-centric, they might value certification more than organizations with different values.
So it's not just about whether the certification makes you a better HR professional. It's also about whether those skills are even valued by certain company cultures.
Exactly.
Okay, so that brings us back to Latham and his work on test validation.
Right, because he argues that for certification to have any real value, the exams themselves need to accurately reflect what it takes to be successful in an HR role.
So, are they actually testing the right things?
Yeah, that's the key question. And Latham digs into these two important concepts, content validity and criterion-related validity.
Okay, break those down for me.
Sure. So content validity is all about making sure the exam covers, the essential knowledge and skills that you actually need in HR.
Okay, makes sense.
And then criterion-related validity is looking at whether passing the exam actually correlates with, better job performance in the real world.
So, does acing the test actually mean you'll be a great HR professional?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out.
I see.
And Latham seems to think that, based on the limited evidence we have, certification is worthwhile.
Okay.
But he acknowledges we need more research to really solidify that connection.
All right, so let's bring in a different perspective. We've got Rob Paxton, who's an HR executive with, over 15 years of experience.
Yeah, he offers a really interesting perspective from the trenches.
Definitely. So Paxton says that he's never made a hiring decision solely based on whether someone had a certification,
Right. Like, it might be a factor, but it's not the be-all and end-all.
especially for someone like Paxton who has all that real-world experience.
Exactly. And he really emphasizes that real-world success in HR hinges on things like business acumen, building relationships, focusing on talent development.
So it's not just about textbook knowledge.
Right. You've got to be able to apply that knowledge strategically in a, fast-paced business environment.
Makes sense. So it's not just about the individual, right? We have to look at the organizational context too, like what skills are valued, what actually drives results for the business.
Absolutely. And that's why the call for evidence-based research is so important here. We need those rigorous studies that can help us untangle all these complexities.
To get a better understanding of what certification really brings to the table.
Exactly. And, what's great is that Lennox Hall and Aquinas, they didn't just call for more research. They actually, laid out some recommendations for how to make those studies really good.
Yeah, they really want to see researchers and practitioners working together, right, to design studies that are both rigorous and relevant to what's actually happening out there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because you need the scientific expertise of the researchers, but you also need the practitioners who are, actually in the trenches to make sure the research is asking the right questions.
Makes total sense. They also talk a lot about transparency.
Oh, for sure. Especially when it comes to potential conflicts of interest.
Right, anyone submitting research proposals should be upfront about any ties they might have to the certification bodies.
Exactly. Because that kind of transparency is super crucial for making sure the research is objective.
They really advocate for sharing the data with other researchers.
Oh, yeah. That's key for good science.
So that the findings can be replicated and built upon.
Yeah, you don't want findings to just be sitting there in isolation. You want
Right.
other researchers to be able to scrutinize the methods, see if they can replicate the results, and build a more solid body of knowledge.
So it's this whole idea of evidence-based HR management
Exactly. It's about moving beyond gut feelings and anecdotes.
and grounding our practices in solid data.
Yes. And the potential benefits are huge.
Yeah, because it's not just about understanding certification.
Right.
It's about elevating the entire HR profession.
Yeah.
Absolutely. By showing that we're, committed to data-driven decisions,
Yeah.
we can increase the credibility of HR and show organizations that we're serious about results.
I know what you're thinking.
But,
Okay, this is all very interesting.
uh-huh.
But what does it actually mean for me?
Yeah, what am I supposed to take away from all this?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that the conversation is still going.
Yeah.
The jury's still out on whether certification is, definitively valuable.
True.
But what's exciting is that we're moving in the right direction.
Okay.
We're moving away from just speculation and opinions and toward a more evidence-based approach.
Yeah, we're starting to ask the tough questions and demand solid data to back up all these claims about what certification can do.
And that's a huge win for the profession.
It is.
This deep dive has really shown us, how complicated this issue is.
Sure.
There are so many things to consider.
Yeah.
Individual skills,
Mm.
organizational values, business outcomes.
Mm.
It's not just a simple yes or no answer.
Nope, not at all. And that brings us to this really thought-provoking question that Lennox Hall and Agrinas ask in their article.
Okay, what's that?
They basically say, if you were designing a study on HR certification, what would you want to measure?
That's a good question.
Right. What kind of results would actually convince you that certification matters or that it doesn't matter?
So, as you're listening to all this, what stands out to you? What kind of data would you need to see?
It's a great question to think about, maybe even talk about with your colleague.
Because, the future of HR certification might depend on how we answer that question.
Exactly.
It really makes you think, what would that perfect study look like?
It does. And I think, before you even get to the study design, you have to figure out what value even means in this context.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Are we talking about individual career success? Do people with certifications get higher salaries? Do they get promoted faster?
Or are we talking about things on a bigger scale,
Yeah.
on an organizational level?
Right. Do companies with more certified HR professionals have better employee retention?
Do they perform better financially?
Exactly. And then even if we agree on what we're measuring, there's the whole question of how to measure it.
Yeah, for sure.
Do we just compare salaries between certified and non-certified HR folks?
Do we look at, like, employee turnover rates at different companies?
Right. Or maybe we go even deeper and, look at how certification influences the actual HR work that's being done.
Ooh,
Like,
interesting.
are companies with certified HR people developing better, um, more strategic initiatives?
Yeah, and are those initiatives actually leading to things like better employee engagement or, improved
Yeah.
productivity?
Right. Things that you can actually see making a difference to the bottom
Yeah,
line.
yeah, I see what you mean.
And don't forget what Garza and Morganson said about company
Oh,
values.
right, right.
Like, would a company that's really into innovation see the same return on investment from certification as, say, a company that's more focused on, like, stability and tradition?
It's complicated.
It is. There's no easy answer.
But I think that's what makes this whole topic so interesting, right?
Totally.
It really makes you think critically about, like, what matters in HR, how we define success.
Yeah, and how all of that fits within each company's, specific situation.
The big puzzle.
It is. But, at the end of the day, I think what's going to move the HR profession forward is this focus on evidence-based practice.
Yes, 100%.
By really embracing research and, demanding data to back up the things we say.
We can show the world that HR is a serious field that's all about getting real results.
Exactly.
So whether you're just starting out in HR or you're a seasoned pro.
Hopefully this deep dive has given you a new way of looking at this whole debate about certification.
And as we wait for more research to come out, we encourage you to, stay curious.
Stay informed.
Keep asking those tough questions.
And maybe even start thinking about how you would design that perfect study.
Great advice.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a brand new topic.